Close to the heart, Carol's second wind. At 55, Carol Bennett woke up every morning feeling a weight that had nothing to do with age. 27 years in the same accounting position at Western Technologies had taken their toll. The numbers that once seemed so clear and reliable now looked like prison bars. This Monday morning, she looked at her reflection in the bathroom, noticing the silver threads in her chestnut hair, the soft wrinkles around her eyes, and wondered, is this all that's in store for me? Carol never considered herself a person prone to drama. Stable, reliable, practical. That's how colleagues and family described her. Of course, she was proud of these qualities. Before. Her husband Jack had died 5 years ago from a heart attack. Their daughter Lisa lived in Seattle with her family, and son Michael taught at a university in Boston. Sunday phone calls, rare holiday visits. That's what remained of a once bustling home. Carol, you're daydreaming again. Diana's voice, her closest colleague and friend in accounting, brought her back to reality. Sorry, I was lost in thought. Carol turned to her computer screen, where an unfinished quarterly report waited. Listen, Ben is gathering everyone in the conference room. Looks like some important announcement. Ben Harris, the financial director and Carol's direct supervisor, was young, ambitious, and full of ideas about restructuring and optimization. Each time he used those words, a chill ran down Carol's spine. The conference room was filled with financial department employees. The air was tense and smelled of coffee from the vending machine. Carol took her usual seat in the second row. Good morning, everyone, Ben began with that energetic smile that Carol always found a bit unnatural. I want to share important news with you. The company has decided to implement a new financial system that will significantly automate most accounting and reporting processes. A quiet whisper rippled through the room. This means, Ben continued, that some positions will be reorganized. We plan to reduce the accounting staff by approximately 30% in the next 3 months. Carol felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Diana, whose eyes widened with fear. At 58, Diana was older than Carol, and the thought of finding a new job at their age seemed nightmarish. We will, of course, offer a severance package to those affected by the reduction, added Ben in a tone as if offering a generous discount. And for those who stay, training will be organized for working with the new system. The rest of the meeting passed in a fog. Carol heard the words but couldn't fully process them. Only after returning to her desk did the reality of what was happening begin to wash over her in waves. What are we going to do, Carol? Whispered Diana, her usually perfectly styled hair looking disheveled, though she hadn't touched it. I don't know, Carol answered honestly. But maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's a chance to try something new. Even as she spoke these words, Carol didn't believe them. What new things could she try at 55 with an accounting degree and almost 30 years of experience at one company? Who would need her? A week after the announcement, Carol received a letter inviting her to meet with Ben and an HR representative. She knew what this meeting meant even before she entered the office. Carol, thank you for coming, began Ben, gesturing to a chair. This is Sarah from HR. Hello, nodded Carol, feeling her mouth go dry. Carol, you've been a valuable employee of Western Technologies for many years. Ben delivered his prepared speech. Your contribution to the company is invaluable. But unfortunately, in light of recent changes, You're firing me, Carol interrupted, surprising herself with her directness. Ben looked a bit embarrassed. We're offering an early retirement program, Sarah gently corrected, with a decent severance package and health insurance for the next 2 years. Early retirement sounded better than dismissal, but the essence remained the same. Her time at the company was over. When is my last day? Asked Carol, trying to stay calm. In a month, answered Ben. This will give you time to complete current projects and hand over your responsibilities. Leaving the office, Carol leaned against the wall in the corridor and took a deep breath. Strangely, instead of the expected despair, she felt something like relief. Perhaps part of her had always wanted change but was afraid to take the first step. Returning home to her quiet apartment, Carol poured herself a glass of wine, something she rarely did on weekdays. She put on Jack's favorite jazz record and sat in what used to be his chair. What would he say now? Jack had always been the more adventurous of the two, dreaming of travels after retirement, buying a small house by a lake, finally taking up all those hobbies there was never time for. But time ran out for him too early. What about your dreams, Carol? She asked herself. Did you even have any? Carol suddenly realized that for most of her life, she had postponed dreams for later. First studies, then career, raising children, and now with the children grown, Jack gone, and her career suddenly ended. What was left? The next day, Carol called Lisa to share the news. "Mom, that's terrible," exclaimed Lisa. "How can they do this after all the years you've given them?" "Actually, I'm okay," said Carol, and as she spoke these words, she realized she truly felt that way. "Maybe this is exactly what I need, a change." "But what will you do?" Concern was evident in Lisa's voice. "Maybe you should move in with us in Seattle." The kids would be thrilled to see Grandma more often. The thought of moving in with her daughter flashed through Carol's mind. It would be the easiest path, becoming a full-time grandmother, helping with the children, preparing family dinners. But something inside her resisted this idea. "I don't know yet, dear. Give me time to think." In her last weeks at the company, Carol decided to use her lunch breaks for walks, something she almost never did before, preferring to eat at her desk while continuing to work. She discovered a small park 2 blocks from the office and now wandered its paths every day, watching people feeding pigeons, mothers with strollers, artists painting outdoors. It was during one of these walks that she noticed a small cafe on the corner of the park. "Close to the Heart," read the modest sign. Something about this name attracted Carol, and she decided to go in. Inside, the cafe was cozy and peaceful. A few tables, soft lighting, bookshelves along the walls. Behind the counter stood a woman about her age with short gray hair and bright blue eyes. "Welcome to Close to the Heart," she smiled. "What can I offer you?" "What would you recommend?" asked Carol, studying the menu. "Our homemade blueberry pie just came out of the oven," replied the woman, "and it pairs perfectly with our signature bergamot tea." "Sounds wonderful," agreed Carol. While the woman prepared her order, Carol looked around. The walls were decorated with photographs and paintings. Not professional, but made with love. Next to each was a small text or poem. "These are works by our visitors," explained the woman, noticing Carol's interest. "I'm Grace, by the way. This is my cafe." "Carol," she introduced herself, "works by your visitors." "Yes," nodded Grace, placing tea and pie before her. "We hold creative evenings here for the local community. Poetry, painting, music. Mostly older people, of course. Young folks prefer noisier places." Carol tried the pie, which turned out to be truly delicious. "This is very tasty," she said sincerely. "Do you bake it yourself?" "Most of the time," nodded Grace, "though sometimes my daughter helps. You know, I wasn't always a cafe owner." "Really?" Carol became interested. "Until I was 52, I worked as a nurse," smiled Grace. "And then I decided it was time to do what I always dreamed of." Grace's story touched something deep inside Carol. The woman told how after her divorce and her children leaving home, she felt emptiness. But instead of giving up, decided to take a risk and open a place that could become a second home for people like her. "Many think that after 50 it's too late to start something new," said Grace. "But that's not true at all. Sometimes that's exactly when you finally understand what's truly important." When Carol returned to the office, she felt different. Grace's story had ignited a spark of hope in her. Perhaps the end of her career at Western Technologies wasn't an end, but rather the beginning of something new. In the following days, Carol began regularly visiting Close to the Heart Cafe. She noticed that many visitors knew each other by name, and the atmosphere felt more like a community than just a cafe. One evening, she stayed for a poetry night, where people of different ages, but predominantly over 50, read their poems, some funny, some sad, but all sincere. "Would you like to join our cooking masterclass on Saturday?" asked Grace when Carol stopped by the cafe on Friday. "We'll be learning to bake seasonal pies." Carol hesitated. She had never considered herself particularly talented in cooking, preferring simple dishes or ready-made meals in her daily life. I'm not sure I can handle it. Everyone started from scratch, smiled Grace. Besides, it's not a competition, just a way to spend time together doing something pleasant. To her surprise, Carol agreed. Saturday's masterclass turned out to be a revelation. Carol, along with 5 other participants under Grace's guidance, mixed dough, prepared apple and cinnamon filling, learned to make beautiful patterns with dough. The atmosphere was so warm and friendly that the initial awkwardness quickly disappeared. "You have a natural talent, Carol," said Grace, watching her carefully arrange a lattice of dough over the filling. "Really?" Carol couldn't hide her surprise and pleasure at the compliment. "Absolutely. Your hands seem to know what to do." When Carol's pie came out of the oven, golden, fluffy, aromatic, she felt a surge of pride she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Something created by her hands, something that could bring joy to others. "You must try Carol's pie," announced Grace to the other cafe visitors when they all sat down to taste the results of their work. Compliments from strangers, their sincere smiles when they tried her pie, gave Carol an almost forgotten sense of satisfaction. Returning home, Carol felt a desire to continue experimenting. She looked through her old cookbooks, many of which were gifts but had never really been used. In one of them, given by her mother many years ago, she found family recipes written by hand. The next day, Sunday, she baked a pie following her grandmother's recipe. The aroma of baking filled the apartment, evoking memories of childhood, of large family dinners, of laughter and warmth. Carol decided to video call Lisa to show her the result. "Mom, that looks amazing," Lisa marveled. "I didn't know you could cook like that." "I didn't know either," Carol admitted honestly, "but it seems I enjoy it." "You know," Lisa said thoughtfully, "you always describe Grandma's baking so deliciously, but you never really cooked much yourself." "There was no time," Carol shrugged. "Always work, home, you and Michael. And now? And now it seems time has appeared." The following week, Carol brought her homemade pie to Close to the Heart Cafe to share with Grace and other regulars. The success was overwhelming. "Carol, this is delightful," exclaimed one of the women, Eleanor, a retired artist. "You should sell your baking." Carol laughed, but the idea stuck in her head. When her last day at Western Technologies finally arrived, colleagues organized a small farewell tea party. Carol brought her apple pie, which was met with surprise and delight. "I didn't know you were such a master baker, Carol," remarked Ben, awkwardly avoiding conversation about her dismissal. "I didn't know either," she smiled. "Sometimes life brings surprises." Saying goodbye to colleagues was emotional, especially with Diana, who fortunately kept her position, albeit with modified duties. "I'll miss you," said Diana, hugging Carol. "Don't be a stranger." "I promise," nodded Carol. And at that moment, she realized she didn't feel fear of the unknown, but rather excitement and anticipation. First weeks after leaving her job were strange. Waking up without an alarm, not rushing to work, having the opportunity to drink coffee, looking out the window for as long as she wanted. All this was new and unusual, but Carol didn't allow herself to fall into a routine of idleness. She created a daily schedule that included morning walks, reading, and of course, baking. Her kitchen, which was previously used mainly for heating ready-made meals, now filled with the aromas of fresh baking. Carol experimented with various recipes, some found in old books, some on the internet, and some she invented herself. She continued to visit Close to the Heart Cafe and always brought something from her baking to share with Grace and other visitors. Her pies and cookies became so popular that people began asking if she could bake something to order for special occasions. One day when the cafe was closing and only Carol and Grace remained, the latter made an unexpected proposal. "Carol, I need to talk to you," began Grace, wiping down tables. "You know that my daughter, who sometimes helped me with baking, is moving to another city." "Yes, you mentioned that. It must be hard for you." "In a way," nodded Grace. "But the thing is, I can't handle the baking alone, especially now that our cafe has become more popular. And honestly, people like your pies even more than mine." Carol smiled modestly. I was thinking, maybe you'd like to work here? Grace asked directly. I can't offer a high salary, but work here? Carol interrupted, surprised by the offer. But I'm not a professional baker. I don't have education or experience. Your pies say otherwise, smiled Grace. Look, I understand this is unexpected. Think about it. We don't need a baker's diploma. We need a person with heart and talent, and you have both. Carol promised to think about it, but already felt her heart speeding up with excitement. Work in a cafe? Bake professionally? Start a completely new career at 55? Returning home, she called Michael, her son, to tell him about the offer. Mom, that sounds amazing. Genuine enthusiasm was evident in his voice. You always talked about Grandma's baking with such love. Maybe this is your calling. Finding a calling at 55? Laughed Carol. Isn't it a bit late? For what? Michael asked seriously. For happiness? For doing what brings you joy? I think it's never too late for that. Her son's words touched Carol. Maybe he was right. Maybe finding your place in life isn't limited to a certain age. The next day, she accepted Grace's offer, agreeing to start with part-time work to see how things would go. Carol's first weeks working at the cafe were simultaneously exhausting and delightful. Physically, it was much harder than sitting at a computer in accounting. She would come home with back and leg pain, flour in her hair and under her nails. But the fatigue was pleasant, and the sense of satisfaction from the pies, cakes, and cookies created with her own hands from the smiles of visitors tasting her baking was worth all the effort. Grace proved to be a patient mentor, sharing secrets of running a business, subtleties of working with dough, and the specifics of interacting with suppliers. Carol absorbed the new knowledge with the enthusiasm of a student. You learn incredibly quickly, remarked Grace one day, watching Carol easily handle the dough mixer that had recently caused her concern. Probably because I genuinely enjoy it, replied Carol, realizing how true her words were. After 3 months, Grace proposed that Carol become a full partner in the business. Your recipes attract new customers, she explained. And honestly, I've been looking for someone to share responsibilities with for a long time. I'm getting too old to handle everything alone. Carol was amazed. A business partner? This was far beyond what she could have imagined just 6 months ago. I don't know what to say, Grace. I don't have money for investment. You have talent and work ethic, and that's worth more than money, Grace said firmly. We can discuss details, but I'm serious. Carol decided not to make hasty decisions. She called Lisa and Michael to tell them about the offer and ask their opinions. Mom, you look so happy, noted Lisa, looking at her mother through the screen. I haven't seen you like this since Dad passed. Really? Carol hadn't realized how noticeable the external changes were. Absolutely, confirmed Michael. There's a sparkle in your eyes, and you smile more. I feel different, admitted Carol. When I create something with my hands, when I see people enjoying my baking, it gives me a sense of purpose I haven't felt in a very long time. Then I think the answer is obvious, said Michael. Carol decided to accept Grace's offer, but with one condition. She wanted to invest part of her severance package into the business, to be an equal partner, not just in words. A year later, Close to the Heart Cafe was transformed. Carol and Grace expanded the menu, adding more types of baking, including some old recipes from Carol's family cookbook. They hired 2 assistants, a young culinary college student, Thomas, and a middle-aged woman, Mary, who, like Carol, was finding herself after being laid off. Every morning, waking up at 5 a.m. to prepare fresh baking for opening, Carol felt energy and purpose that she had so lacked in her last years working as an accountant. Her hands, once nimble on a keyboard, now with the same dexterity needed dough, shaped croissants and decorated cakes. Creative evenings at the cafe became even more popular. Now they were held 3 times a week, poetry on Tuesdays, painting on Thursdays, and music evenings on Saturdays. Carol discovered in herself a talent not only for baking, but also for organizing these events, creating an atmosphere where people of various ages felt comfortable sharing their creativity and finding support. You know, Grace said one day, watching Carol interact with visitors, when I opened this place, this is exactly what I dreamed of. A place where people feel at home, where they can be themselves, regardless of age or experience. And you succeeded, smiled Carol. We, Grace corrected her. We succeeded. On the day, Close to the Heart Cafe celebrated its 10th anniversary and the first anniversary of Carol and Grace's partnership. Lisa and Michael flew in to surprise their mother. They brought Lisa's children, 11-year-old Emma and 8-year-old Jake, who excitedly rushed to hug their grandmother as soon as they saw her behind the counter at the cafe. "Grandma, this place is so cool!" exclaimed Jake, looking around. "Can I try making a pie?" "Of course you can," laughed Carol, hugging her grandson. "We're actually having a master class for children next week." "Then we'll have to stay longer," winked Lisa. That evening, the cafe was packed to capacity. Besides regular visitors, everyone who had ever participated in creative evenings came. Many regular customers, and even some of Carol's former colleagues from Western Technologies, including Diana, who after retirement had become a frequent guest. Thomas, their young assistant, now a full-fledged baker, prepared a special cake for the celebration, decorated with tiny sugar hearts and the inscription, "Close to the Heart, 10 years together with you." When the cake was brought out, everyone applauded, and Grace stepped forward to say a few words. "10 years ago," she began, "I opened this cafe hoping to create a place where people could find not only delicious pastries, but also warmth, acceptance, community. I wasn't sure I would succeed. And a year ago, Carol joined us, and the cafe found new breath, just as she did herself." Grace turned to Carol, smiling. "Carol, would you like to say something?" Carol hadn't planned a speech, but looking at the smiling faces around, at her children and grandchildren, at Grace, at visitors who had become friends, she felt the words coming naturally. "When I lost my job at 55, I thought my life was ending," she said. "I was so focused on what I had lost that I couldn't see what I might find. But thanks to a random walk in the park, this cafe, and Grace," she smiled at her partner, "I discovered that life can begin anew at any age, that it's never too late to find what makes your heart beat stronger." 2 years later, Close to the Heart Cafe opened a second location in a neighboring district. Their former assistant, Thomas, who now managed the new branch, was the investor. For Carol, this was a moment of special pride, seeing the young man they had trained now building his future while maintaining the spirit and traditions of their cafe. Lisa and her family moved to the same city, deciding that a grandmother who had found her calling should be closer to her grandchildren. Now Emma often helped in the cafe after school, showing an interest in baking that seemed to have been passed down from her grandmother. One day when the cafe was already closed and Carol was sitting at a table reviewing recipes for a new seasonal menu, Grace sat down beside her. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, placing a cup of tea in front of Carol. "Life," smiled Carol. "About how unpredictable it is. Who would have thought that being laid off, which seemed like a disaster to me, would lead to all this?" She gestured around the cafe. Walls covered with paintings and photographs. Tables where people gathered daily to share not just food, but also stories. The stage where talents were revealed. The kitchen that had become a place of creativity and self-expression for her. "You know," Grace said thoughtfully, "my mother always said, when one door closes, another always opens. But often we look with regret at the closed door for so long that we don't notice the one that is open." "Wise woman," nodded Carol, "and I'm grateful I noticed the open door in time." The following Sunday, the whole family gathered at Carol's home for a traditional dinner. Lisa was helping her mother in the kitchen, where they were preparing that same apple pie following her grandmother's recipe. Michael, who had come for the weekend from Boston, was playing chess with Jake, while Emma leafed through the old family recipe book, taking notes. "Mom, do you ever regret it?" Lisa suddenly asked, slicing apples. "What?" Carol looked up from the dough. "Leaving accounting, having everything change." Carol thought for a moment, remembering the life she had before. Stable, predictable, safe. And her current one, filled with creativity, new challenges, constant learning, joy from creating with her own hands. No, she answered confidently. I only regret not finding the courage to take this step earlier. But maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I needed to go through all that to truly appreciate what I have now. Lisa hugged her mother, leaving a flory mark on her blouse. You know you inspire me, she whispered. Seeing how you changed your life, how you found yourself in a completely new field, it gives me hope that we can always start anew if we want to. Carol smiled, looking at her family gathered in her home, at the kitchen filled with the aromas of cinnamon and apples, at her hands covered in flour but confident and strong. At 60, her life was filled with meaning, joy, and possibilities she hadn't even dreamed of at 55. She remembered the name of the cafe that had become her second home, Close to the Heart, how accurately it reflected what had happened to her. She hadn't just found a new job, she had found a path to her heart, to what truly made it beat stronger. And this was only the beginning. Thank you for listening to the story. Let us know what you think in the comments, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends and loved ones. Your support motivates us to keep creating new stories every day. Don't miss the next amazing story coming soon to your screen. We're so grateful to have you with us. See you next time.